刘培元的英文教室啊，这是知识阅读篇的第94集啊，就是我们回顾啊，就是英国啊，英国我们在19到25集啊讲过英国啊，它的意思啊，就口头翻译啊，因为我这个都不把这个中文翻译起来，下面啊，有些也很难找中文翻译，为什么呢？因为我们最好用英文去了解啊，不要去靠那个翻译啊，何况有些找不到中文翻译啊，有的中文翻译很烂。好，那我们这边这是下集，我们上次93集已经把一半以上念过了，我们这就是只念啊，因为我们前面啊19到25都讲过它意思，在这边当个听力练习，也当做个回顾啊。如果你前面没有看，你可以先去看前面啊，或者你英文程度很好，就直接听啊。听的时候你可以直接一边看字啊，英文字一边听啊，也可以觉得想训练听力，也可以就是眼睛闭起来直接听啊，也可以。好，我们来念一下啊。这下集我们就把英国念完。Around the end of the 20th century, there were major changes to the governors of the UK, with the establishment of developed administrations of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The statutory incorporation followed acceptance of the European Convention on Human Rights. The UK is still a key global player diplomatically and militarily. It plays leading roles in the UN and NATO. The controversy surrounds some of burdens overseas military deployment, particularly in Afghanistan and Iraq. In the 21st century, the 2008 global financial crisis severely affected the UK economy. The coalition government of 2010 introduced austerity measures intended to tackle the substantial public deficits which resulted. In 2014, the Scottish government held a referendum on Scottish independence, with 55.3% of voters rejecting the independence proposal and opting to remain within the United Kingdom. In 2016, 51.9% of voters in the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. The UK remained a full member of the EU until 31st January 2020. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic is seriously affecting the UK. Emergency financial measures and controls at the moment have been put in place, and plans made for a bailout task force, so the government could take emergency stakes in corporate casualties. Politics. The United Kingdom is a unitary state under a constitutional monarchy. Queen Elizabeth II is a monarch and the head of state of the UK, as well as 15 other independent countries. These 16 countries are sometimes referred to as Commonwealth realms. The monarch has the right to be consulted, the right to encourage, and the right to warn. The Constitution of the United Kingdom is uncodified and consists mostly of a collection of disparate written resources, including statutes, judge-made case law, and the international treaties, together with constitutional conventions. Yet there is no technical difference between ordinary statutes and constitutional law. The UK Parliament can perform constitutional reform simply by passing acts of Parliament. It thus has a political power to change or abolish most any written or unwritten element of the Constitution. No Parliament can pass laws that future parliaments cannot change. Government. The UK is a parliamentary government based on the Westminster system that has been emulated around the world, a legacy of the British Empire. The Parliament of the United Kingdom meets in the Palace of Westminster and has two houses, elected House of Commons and an appointed House of Lords. All bills passed are given royal assent before becoming law. The position of Prime Minister, the UK's head of government, belongs to the person most likely to command the confidence of the House of Commons. This individual is typically the leader of the political party or coalition of parties that host the largest number of seats in their chamber. The Prime Minister chooses a cabinet, and its members are formally appointed by the monarch to form Her Majesty's government. By convention, the monarch respects the Prime Minister's decision of government. The cabinet is traditionally drawn from members of the Prime Minister's party or coalition and mostly from the House of Commons, but always from both legislative houses. The cabinet belongs responsible to both. Executive power is exercised by the Prime Minister and Cabinet, all of whom are sworn into the Privy Council of the United Kingdom and become ministers of the Crown. The Prime Minister is Boris Johnson, who has been in office since 24th July 2019. Johnson is also leader of the Conservative Party. For elections to the House of Commons, the UK is divided into 650 constituencies, each electing a single member of Parliament, MP, by simple plurality. General elections are called by the monarch when the Prime Minister so advises. Prior to the Fixed Term Parliament Acts 2011, the Parliament Acts 1911 and 1949 required that a new election must be called no later than 5 years after the previous general election. The Conservative Party, the Labour Party, and the Liberal Democrats have in modern times been considered the UK's three major political parties, representing the British traditions of conservatism, socialism, and liberalism, respectively. Though the Scottish National Party has been the third largest party by number of seats won, ahead of the Liberal Democrats, in all three elections that have taken place since the 2014 Scottish independence referendum. Economy. The UK is a partially regulated market economy. Based on market exchange rates, the UK is today the fifth largest economy in the world and the second largest in Europe after Germany. HM Treasury, led by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, is responsible for developing and executing the government's public finance policy and economic policy. The Bank of England is the UK's central bank. It is responsible for issuing notes and coins in the nation's currency, the pound sterling. Banks in Scotland and Northern Ireland retain the right to issue their own notes, subject to retaining enough Bank of England notes in reserve to cover their issue. The pound sterling is the world's third largest reserve currency, after the US dollar and the euro. Since 1997, the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, headed by the Governor of the Bank of England, has been responsible for setting interest rates, a level necessary to achieve the overall inflation target for the economy set by the Chancellor each year. The UK service sector makes up around 79% of GDP. London is one of the world's largest financial centers, ranking second in the world behind New York City in the Global Financial Centers Index in 2020. London also has the largest city GDP in Europe. Edinburgh ranks 17th in the world and 6th in Western Europe in the Global Financial Center Index in 2020. Tourism is very important to the British economy, with over 27 million tourists arriving in 2004. The United Kingdom's rank is the sixth major tourist destination in the world, and London has the most international visitors of any city in the world. Ethnic groups. Historically, indigenous British people were thought to be descended from the various ethnic groups that settled there before the 12th century: the Celts, Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Nords, and Normans. Welsh people could be the oldest ethnic group in the UK. A 2006 genetic study shows that more than 50% of England's gene pool contains Germanic Y chromosomes. Another 2005 genetic analysis indicates that about 70% of the traceable ancestors of the modern British population had arrived in the British Isles by about 6,200 years ago. At the start of the British Neolithic or Stone Age, and that the British probably shared a common ancestry with the Basque people. The UK has a history of non-white immigration, with Liverpool having the oldest black population in the country, dating back to at least for the 1730s, during the period of African slave trade. During this period, it is estimated that Afro-Caribbean population in Great Britain was 10,000 to 15,000, which later declined due to the abolition of slavery. The UK also has oldest Chinese community in Europe, dating to the arrival of Chinese seamen in the 19th century. In 1950, there were probably fewer than 20,000 non-white residents in Britain, almost all born overseas. In 1951, there were an estimated 94,500 people living in Britain who had been born in South Asia, China, Africa, and the Caribbean, just under 0.2% of the UK population. By 1961, this number had more than quadrupled to 384,000, just over 0.7% of the United Kingdom population. Since 1948, substantial immigration from Africa, the Caribbean, and South Asia has been a legacy of ties forged by the British Empire. Migration from new EU member states in Central and Eastern Europe since 2004 has resulted in growth in these population groups, although some of this migration has been temporary. Since the 1990s, there has been substantial diversification of the immigrant population, with migrants to the UK coming from a much wider range of countries than previous ways, which tended to involve a larger number of immigrants coming from a relatively small number of countries. 我们就用上下集把它这样子讲完当做听力英文听力练习也不错也可以长点知识，了解一下英国。我目前有15个YouTube 频道不是只有一个，所以麻烦要鼓励的话就15个花3分钟时间全部都按订阅谢谢大家这集讲这里。